Okay, it's 6 o'clock on my clock, so I'm going to start the meeting. Thank you all for your attendance at tonight's meeting of the Planning Committee, 4th of October. Apologies for absence and appointment of substitute members. I've received apologies from Councillor Russell. Are there any more?
No further apologies, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Any declarations of interest? No, thank you. Oh, yes, Councillor Irvine-Smith.
Is that on the planning tonight, there is a planning application, and it's in front of us because it is a councillor, and I know it's not named, but I know the councillor, and he just asked me. I didn't discuss with him, but he has just asked me if after the meeting I could send him a note to say how it went. That's all.
Okay, that's item 7E. Okay, lovely, thank you. Minutes of the meeting on the 7th of June will come to our next meeting. Chair's announcements. I'm just going to read this statement out. Members of the public are permitted to film, broadcast and report on the meeting, subject to the efficient running of the meeting and not affected the meeting by making noises. Only those people who have been registered to speak can speak. Members of the public are required not to call out during the committee's decisions on any item. There are no planned fire drills, so if the alarm does sound, evacuation instructions will be given by officers. We tend to move across the road and go down Guildhall Road if the fire alarm does go off. Okay, and please ensure that any devices are switched off or put onto silent. The other item that I'm going to talk about is item 7D, Billing Road. As there's a lot of interest in this item, I'm going to bring that forward as the first item. Okay, is Councillor Smith with us for that?
Yes.
Fantastic, that's great. Okay then, item 5, other reports. There aren't any. Council applications, there aren't any. So we'll move on to item 7A. Oh, sorry, 7D, which is the Billing Road. Jonathan, this is yours. If you'd like to present the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. 73 Billing Road, Northampton, conversion of an existing family dwelling into a 5-person house in multiple occupation with a single-storey rear extension. The existing property is a 5-bedroom dwelling. The plan before you shows the location of the site, a row of 8 terrace properties within the Billing Road conservation area, quite a substantial rear garden, small front garden fronting onto Billing Road. Parking is provided primarily on street, is problematic at times on Billing Road and also Upper Thrift Street. Moving on to the next slide, please. This shows the existing layout of the property, 5-bedroom property, cellar below. Next slide, please. This shows the proposed layout converted into 5-bedroom HIMO, cellar to remain as existing, large lounge, office area, and also large kitchen diner. The kitchen diner would exceed 24 square metres. Next slide, please. This slide shows a single-story rear extension which would project 2.24 metres off the back elevation of the property, will be constructed in matching materials and could be erected under permitted development given its minor scale. Next slide, please. The slide on the left shows the front of the property. This slide was taken several weeks ago. And the slide on the right shows the back of the property where the rear extension would go. Next slide, please. This shows the front of the property and some of the parking issues that are experienced by residents along Billing Road. As you can see, parking is a bit of an issue along the street, with residents competing for parking throughout the day and the evening. As I said, the site meets the concentration standards of 8.3% calculated within a 50-metre radius. As I said already, the site is in a conservation area. Conservation are raising no objection. Because the proposal is for 5 bedrooms, which is the same number of bedrooms as existing, Highways have removed their original objection. When the original application came in, it was for 8-person HIMO. That's now been reduced to 5 persons. We've gone out to reconsultation on that. Although a number of neighbours have still objected, a total of 9 objections are received in total. The highways have removed their objection to the application. In terms of the room sizes, it meets planning policy standards. There's a bus stop opposite the site, and also a second bus stop approaching 90 metres further along the Billing Road. So it is a sustainable location. There have been a lot of residents' concerns, and those are detailed in the report. The recommendations for approval. The addendum in front of you, councillors, there's an amendment to the condition number 4, which is the refuse condition. The wording of the reason for the condition has been amended because it was a typographical error. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jonathan. We have 4 speakers on this item. I'll call the speakers to address the committee one by one. If you take a seat at the table, you'll see below the screen in front of me there are 3 lights, a red, amber and a green. You'll have 3 minutes to address the committee. There'll be a 30-second warning and the amber light will come on when you've got 30 seconds left. Okay? So to be fair to everybody, I'll make sure that we keep to the 3 minutes. So the first speaker I have is Belinda Kelly. Thank you. If you'd like to come and address the meeting. I know it can be quite daunting to address a council meeting, so just talk to me, ignore everybody else. Okay, thank you. Oh, and just press the microphone button where the little voice is, and that should turn the light.
Oh yes, I think.
Great.
Now?
That's it. And just say who you are and who you represent before you start.
Okay, I'm Belinda Kelly. I'm a resident on Billing Road, and I'm speaking against the application.
Okay, thank you very much. We have 3 minutes starting from there.
Okay. I'm here to speak, or we're here to speak against the conversion of 73 Billing Road from a single household into a 5-room HMO. We object for the following reasons. 73 Billing Road sits in the centre of a well-tended Victorian terrace within the Billing Road conservation area. As such, it is a heritage asset of historic value. Standard rules do not apply. According to the National Planning Policy Framework, Section 189, these assets are an irreplaceable resource and should be conserved in a manner appropriate to their significance, so that they can be enjoyed for their contribution to the quality of life of existing and future generations. Standard rules do not apply. West Northamptonshire Council has extended planning controls to give greater protection to preserve the character and appearance of the area, and has adopted Article 4 directions to restrict usual permitted development rights. Standard rules do not apply. How is it acceptable then for a single household family home within a picturesque terrace of other single household family homes within a conservation area to be extended as per standard permitted development and converted into an HMO at the same time? West Northamptonshire Council has adopted the Houses in Multiple Occupation Supplementary Planning Document, referred to in the Planning Committee report as the SPD. We refer the committee to the report. Under concentration of HMOs in the local area, section 7.2, it is stated the SPD is up to date, having been adopted in November 2019, and it can be afforded substantial weight in decision making. And yet, under highways parking, section 7.15, recommendations within the SPD appear to be dispensed with completely in favour of anecdotal evidence for inspectors, none of whom appear to have contributed to this particular report. In section 7.3, it states that, in accordance with the SPD, the concentration of HMOs would fall within the 10% in a 50-metre radius limit. The 10% rule is the standard for Northampton. However, a conservation area is not standard. Standard rules do not apply. While there are inconsistencies in the weights given to the HMO SPD, Little to no weight appears to have been given to the Billing Road conservation area. 73 Billing Road is in a conservation area and standard rules do not apply. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Just remain seating there for a moment. I'll just see if any of the committee's got any questions for you. Any questions for Belinda? No? Okay.
Chair.
Yes.
So, on this, specifically, were you?
Councillor Fox, could you speak into my...
Oh, yes, sorry. Yeah, were you told that you couldn't bring visual aids to the meeting? Is that right?
No, I wasn't told that, no.
All right, fine. So that's good. So you knew that people know that you can.
I wasn't aware of
Okay.
that, no.
We can't have visual aids on the night. We can have them emailed to us prior, but we can't have handouts at the meeting.
Yeah. So I hope you don't mind this distraction. So when people want to make their case and they want to use visual aids, because I couldn't see anything on the website about this, do we make it clear that if they send images and presentations in advance, then they can be shown on the screens, or do we rely upon? Because otherwise, how would they know that they can do that? I'm seeing more and more cases where I have to tell people that they can do that because they don't appear to already know.
No. Well, people can come and address the committee, but we
Yeah.
can't show presentations.
Well, sorry, we can, can't we? People, I've seen, or the rules changed with the movement on it, but previously people could make their case and we could see the images of things. Has there been a rule change?
There must have been, because we've never allowed that here. Sure.
Well, and Toaster.
Through you, Chair. I mean, you can submit screenshots or slides or photographs as an objector.
Yeah.
The same rules apply for registering to speak and so forth. That has to be done within a certain time frame. Forgive me, I haven't got the constitution in front of me, but there is an element in there that does actually suggest that is the case.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
But do we tell people that they can do that? Because if, like I said, there's nothing on the website. I'm concerned that people who want to object are objecting without that knowledge, and therefore we get a lovely presentation about all the pros of a particular application. But if people aren't being given that information, then they're effectively got one hand tied behind their back.
Look, I've never seen any person speak for the public present in 20 years. I've never seen any member of the public bring a presentation to us.
Wow. Because in Daventry and Toaster,
Yeah.
I would say it was almost the majority. I mean, at least 50%.
Well, maybe we'll take that to Democracy and Standards.
Yeah.
Yeah, sort it out.
I would suggest that the very least we should do is on the website make it clear that that's within people's rights to be able to do that. And if people do register their intention to speak and object, it would be courteous, if nothing else, to remind them of that right, if you agree.
I think what we can do, just for transparency, we could lift that paragraph or that requirement, or what an individual chooses to object to an application, what they have to do within a certain date, and put that on the website. I mean, obviously, unfortunately, it would be we can't actually remind every single objector that what they need to do, what their rights are, what they should do if they're proposing to speak at the committee. But if it's on the website and it's signposted, that's what we could do. Councillor.
That's better than nothing.
But can I just say there, with regard to the website, it's very difficult to navigate. I went all around the houses just trying to find the venue of this meeting, I'm afraid, so it's really not straightforward. I guess it is if you're familiar and use it regularly, but first time I've had cause to use it and I couldn't work my way around it.
Yes, thank you. I just have a question. You said that no standard rule apply, and you made reference to the extension and that it will not be on the planning, on the permitted development.
Mm-hmm.
But according, I think, to what the officer said, it was under a permitted development. So could I have clarification, because you say something and the officer did say something else in your presentation. So could I have clarification?
I'm happy to clarify, because the extension's in the back and because of its size, less than 3 metres in depth, it could ordinarily be erected under permitted development. So that's the fallback position open to the applicant. The Article 4 for the property protects the front of the property in terms of alterations to the front elevation, in terms of the rear extension. Although the rear extension is included in the description of development, the point that I'm trying to make is it could be erected under permitted development, and it would be unreasonable to refuse application for the rear extension on its own because it could be done without the need for planning permission.
I'm sorry, and I will do like Councillor Frost. I have been sitting on planning committee in Daventry for a number of years, and Article 4 it doesn't say front or things, it's an Article 4. So is that something? So because in Welford, a village, they had an Article 4, and whatever planning permission was, it could not be under delegated rules. So can I have an explanation, please?
Yes, through you, Chair, if I may. Each Article 4 is obviously brought about for a particular reason, to restrict certain types of development going ahead and changes to the setting of the conservation area. I can certainly think of at least, not for this authority, but at least 4 Article 4s, that each one of them, 4 villages in a row, the wording of it and the requirement of it is different and differs. So a particular Article 4 could come forward for the preservation of the frontage, or the entirety of the property and the curtilage, or just the property itself, excluding the curtilage. So it would boil down to the wording of what the Article 4 would restrict. By restrict, I mean it removes the permitted development rights for alterations to those. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for the clarification.
Thank you. Councillor Beardsworth.
Thank you, Chair. I'll ask you a quick question. What's the parking like on Billing Road?
Abysmal, really is, day and night.
Okay, it's fairly...
We've got a garage, but yeah, it's almost impossible most of the time.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Joyce.
I think Councillor Frost has raised a really good point here tonight. Now, I've driven past a property on the way here tonight, and obviously there is scaffolding around it. Obviously, I might come into a question later on about it. But I think a visual aid to show the state of the property now or as it was before would be really crucial to this hearing tonight, to be honest with you. That's just my view, and I do agree with what Councillor Frost says over there.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Next I'll call upon Councillor Smith. She's joining online, so just bear with us a moment.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
We can, Zoe. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me, Chair?
Yeah, we can, Zoe. Go ahead.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. So I'm Councillor Zoe Smith. I'm one of the councillors for Abington Fitzville, and we're objecting to this application on behalf of the neighbouring residents. And I'd like to draw the committee's attention mainly to the fact that there are 2 really key material planning considerations against this application. So one of the key material planning considerations that's already been mentioned is the conservation area. This is a really important conservation area in Northampton, and that should be taken into account. And I'd like to make sure councillors are aware that there is precedent of the planning inspectorate agreeing with the planning committee's, one of our planning committee's decisions to turn down an application on the grounds of it being in a conservation area. So there is precedent for the planning inspectorate agreeing on that in those terms. Another really key important aspect is the impact on the residential amenity, the impact that the really transient population that can be associated with the HMO would have on the residential amenity, and the conditions that would increase for, and the difficulties it would cause for neighbours. And again, there is recent precedent of the planning inspectorate accepting residential amenity as a reason for an objection to a HMO, and the planning committee deciding to turn down a HMO. So both those really key material planning considerations can be taken into account. I'd also like, finally, I appreciate that highways haven't mentioned parking as a concern. However, obviously the use of a 5-bedroom HMO in terms of parking is going to be considerably greater than that of a family home. And again, one of the council's own officers recently turned down an application, even in a supposedly sustainable location, because of impact on parking. So just a reminder that that too is a material planning consideration. So particularly in terms of the conservation area and its importance, I would urge the committee to take that into account when looking at this application, to listen to the concerns of the neighbours and to consider the material planning considerations against this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Zoe. Just stay there. I'll see if the committee's got any questions for you. Councillor Irving-Swift.
Yes, I know we cannot refer to other planning application, but you say something that on the ground that a house is...
My apologies, I can't hear. I don't know if you can bring the microphone closer at all.
Can you hear now, Zoe? Can you hear?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Thank you.
You said, and maybe it's more to the officers and to you that question, that an application can be refused for an MJO on the basis of a listed housing. Is that a conservation area or listed houses? Is that a material consideration or not? Because I would be surprised, but I just would like clarification from you or from our officer, please.
Yeah, if I can just briefly, it is a fact that the planning committee has in the past turned down a HMO application on the grounds that it was in a conservation area. And when the applicant took this to appeal, the planning inspectorate upheld the planning committee's decision that it was a material planning consideration.
Okay, thank you. Anything you want to add there, Sean?
Yes, sorry, Chair, through you, if I may. Councillor Smith is correct, yes, there has been recent decisions from the Planning Inspectorate where they have upheld the Planning Committee's decision to overturn the officer recommendation and refuse the application. On that same ilk, I know Councillor Smith did mention about the parking issue. There's been 3 recent appeal decisions where the Planning Committee have also overturned planning officer's decisions and refused the application on parking grounds, which the inspector has allowed the appeal and effectively dismissed that particular element, parking or parking standards. So I just wanted to make it clear, not that I'm trying to steer members one way or the other, but just the full information is there that we have ran the argument on behalf of a recommendation previously on the highway grounds when the highway officer hasn't objected and the inspector hasn't, unfortunately, as the decision, hasn't ruled in favour of the decision of the authority, the final decision to actually dismiss the appeal. It allowed the appeal based on the actual, didn't believe there was an issue with highways. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Any other questions to Councillor Smith? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Smith. I'll call on Councillor Purser. Good evening, Councillor Purser. You've got 3 minutes.
Thank you,
give you a bit
Chair.
of time to get ready.
Apologies for being a bit late. I recognise this application. I'm sorry, I'm Bob Purser. I'm Ward Councillor for Abington and Phipsville Ward. I have 3 concerns about this application. Firstly, the level of concern it's causing to local residents and the impact it's having on the conservation area. And I think there is an issue about a conservation area isn't just about the buildings, it's also about the interaction between the people and the buildings and the care they take on the area. The second issue is about the fact that there has been some referral of this case to the Planning Enforcement Service in relation to the conservation area. And I think there is an issue there about whether the committee should make a decision given that there may be enforcement action taking place. And I think the committee might want to be informed about that from officers, about the significance of that. Councillor Smith's talked about the parking issue. It's a really difficult issue around there. I was at a residents' meeting last week where we spent a lot of time hearing the problems of parking around that area. not to do with this application, but just generally, this is a very difficult area because of its proximity to the hospital and to a local school. And I suppose the third, yes, and I suppose the SPD does say that there should be one parking space per bedroom in an HMO, and really this application does not provide that level of cover. So those are my key points that I'd wish to make to the committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. First, we just say there, we've got some questions. Go to Councillor Beardsworth first. And then...
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned about the buy-in of a family that lives in the area. And we're going to have 5 different people living in these properties. And it does say with the parking that it's going to have a cumulative impact on the of an HMO, because it's supposed to supply a 1-bedroom car for 1 bedroom. Now, there isn't room for that, and they're putting a proviso that there's a bus stop. But if you've got a car, you're not going to give it up and go on the bus. People don't, unfortunately. So it's going to make a huge impact, an extra 5 cars, or even 4. So that's one thing. And I know what the planning officer says. We can't bring planning applications into being. But I just get fed up with sending these things to the inspectorate and then just turning us down just because they don't believe this is going to have an impact on the general public and the people in the area. You know, this is why we turn things down in the past, is because, yeah, I know it's a question. So you know, and I know, you have HMOs in your ward, how much problems we get with them, and you would agree with me that there are a lot of problems that come with HMOs. I'll let you finish that off.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think it's a really difficult issue for the committee, but the reality on the ground is there are so many spaces and there are so many cars, these are not houses that come with garages or parking, so it does cause a real problem, exacerbated by the fact it's so near the hospital, and also you've got this cycle lane going along the front of the houses as well. So it is a really difficult issue.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Purser. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for you, Councillor Purser, and then for officers, please. So you mentioned enforcement action. Can you go into a bit more details about that? And then also, if there is enforcement action taking place, is it a material planning reason that can be used within our decision? Thank you.
I understand it's about repointing of the property, which is very important in terms of the look of this very important cityscape, of townscape for our town. And I guess the issue, well, again, is it a planning issue? This is where it gets difficult, but there is an amount of trust about, is this going to be a well looked after? Is this going to retain its character within the conservation area? That's the question I've got.
Sean,
yes, thank you, Chair, through you. Without wishing to prejudice any further investigation of the authority, I can confirm that the front of the property has been repointed. As you can see from the central photograph, it's a very dark mortar between the bricks. The colour of mortar there is almost the same colour as the header, or the concrete or stone header above the windows. It's more of a white or cream effect. So we are investigating that. That is covered by the Article 4. That would have needed permission to actually do or alter that facade of the building. In terms of what Councillor Purser said there about should it be, for want of a better word, batched up as one consideration, that regardless of whatever the decisions reached this evening, that investigation will continue and will conclude based on the impact that has on the actual setting of the conservation area and the fact that that needed consent in its own right, because it has altered the facade of the building. So to answer the question, you can, in theory, have 2 different elements that operate on one particular property here. Where a decision to be reached on this, for argument's sake, to approve this, it doesn't mean that any work that's still been investigated then becomes automatically lawful. That will still could still be subject to further investigation and action of the authorities to rectify that, if that's the option or decision that's reached by the authority. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Irving-Swift.
Yes, Councillor Purser, as you know, we are in a committee that we can just deal with matter of planning in front of us. And you allude to the fact that if it's an HMO, people might not take care of their property as well, as because you would have 5 people. How do you think it could be a material consideration, a planning consideration? Because I have a problem, the house is not listed, so inside you have some modification. But that, I cannot see how it can be in our remit. So could you help me to understand how you think it could be in our remit as a planning committee? Thank you.
Yes, I think that's quite a difficult issue, but I do think, you know, that a conservation area is good as the people who, I mean, the local authority has a role in enforcing it, but it's also about the residents buying into that. And certainly I was at planning policy last week where the view was we didn't need a conservation area for a particular, well, this particular property didn't need to be in a conservation area because the owner was going to take good care of it. So it's getting that balance right. And I think a conservation area is more than just the buildings, is the point I'm making. Now, that may not be recognised in planning law, but that would be in terms of a good community, I think it is a relevant factor.
Okay, thank you very much, Bob. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Joyce, one more question.
So without, I know the Billing Road, so I can see from the end picture there, or the end two, but there seems to be a road junction there, Councillor Purser. I'm assuming, I don't
Correct,
know what road
yes.
that is.
That's Upper Thrift Street.
Right, so is that up a street that's heavily parked up already?
Oh, yes, it's an absolute nightmare.
Right, okay, so you're looking to increase the cars from 1 to possibly an additional 4 more cars?
Yes.
So I'm assuming that's where additional cars will go around
Yes.
there, causing other issues for owners
Yes.
parking their cars
Yes.
elsewhere?
Yes, yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Purser. So in the interest of balancing, then I'll call on Matt Collison. I'd like to come and address the committee, please. Just say who you are, who you represent, and then your 3 minutes will start.
Thank you. I'm Matt Collison. I'm a Chartered Town Planner, Director of CC Town Planning, based in Northampton. I'm speaking in support of the application on behalf of the applicant.
Okay, thank you. 3 minutes start now.
Thank you. The application before members this evening seeks to change the use of the existing dwelling from a 5-bedroom house to a house of multiple occupation for up to 5 occupants. It's evident that this planning application has generated a significant number of objections, but this is often the case with applications for HMOs, given that a number of impacts can result from them if not properly managed or controlled. In this case, a number of the comments raised relate to concerns over who will be living in the house, and a number of assumptions are made over the type of people who are perceived to live in HMOs. The applicant's intention is to create a high-quality, well-managed HMO, and whilst it's not a material planning consideration, the intended occupiers include the owner's daughter, one of whom is a doctor, and one a pharmacist, and the other future occupiers are likely to be healthcare professionals or other professional people benefiting from the site's proximity to the town centre and hospitals. The house was purchased on this basis. Many of the objections raised highlight concerns over the loss of a potential family home and that there are too many HMOs in the area. To prevent an over-concentration of HMOs within a local area, the Council revised its planning policy in 2019, setting out a limit of no more than 10% of dwellings to be HMOs within a 50-metre radius of a site, irrespective of whether the site's in a conservation area. As set out in the report, if permission was granted for this development, the area concentration would be at 8.3%, and therefore fully in accordance with that policy. Concerns relating to matters such as noise, refuse, and number of occupiers are all controlled through licensing and the suggested planning condition. The accommodation in terms of room sizes, facilities, is all in accordance with the council standards. With regards to parking, as set out in the committee report, it's accepted that the car parking provision is limited in the area. However, as set out in the response from the local highway authority, it's not considered that the proposed use will create any additional demand for parking. The parking requirements are the same for a house or a HMO. It's a 5-bedroom house. The site's in a highly sustainable location. In summary, whilst this is a planning application that's generated a number of objections as set out in the officer's report, there are simply no reasons to justify refusing planning permission for the change of use. The council has sought to control the proliferation of HMOs through policies that prevent an over-concentration of these uses in a particular area. This policy is working well in my view and continues to maintain a mix of dwelling types in an area. Refusal contrary to this policy would, in my view, undermine the policy and reduce its effectiveness in determining future applications for HMOs that don't comply with this policy. No objections have been made from the local highway authority who are satisfied with the parking situation. There are no objections from any consultees, including the conservation officer. The application is fully policy compliant. As such, I hope that the committee will support their officer's recommendation this evening and grant planning permission for the development. Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you. Just remain there. Rupert, you got a question?
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned about the owner and his daughter. If the owner wants his daughter to live there, wouldn't it be easier just to give her the key rather than...
It's a big house. It's a 5-bedroom house. You know, it's they're young daughters. I don't know the applicant, but they don't necessarily want to live there on their own. So it's a big property.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Beard was first, and then come across to you.
Do you know whether Highways have actually visited the site, or has this just been done as a paper exercise?
I don't know. It's a highway. I thought that would be a question for the officers.
It would be, wouldn't it? Yes. I wonder why there isn't a Highways officer here tonight. I have asked in the past that we ought to have representatives from Highways.
We are told they are coming in the future, but they're not here tonight.
It is a very important thing because we need to question them over the parking particularly.
But it does comply with the policy.
And you actually, yes, I appreciate that, but you're saying that his daughter's going to move into the property and a pharmacist, but they won't be there forever, and this will be a forever HMO.
Yeah.
And when they move on, we'll have other people there, and it'll just be people who need a home.
Thank you. We can't really take the tenancy into it because, you know, regardless of who's renting the room, it could be anybody.
Yes, but he mentioned it, so I'm just saying it
What I would say
debate.
is the council have a policy to stop too many HMOs in an area. The council have developed that policy. They've consulted on that policy. This development complies with that policy.
Thank you. Councillor Irvine-Swift.
Yes, you, as was said recently, you cannot get involved of who is renting or not renting, but because it has caused a lot of people in the room are just for that, and I do find it's quite a. It's HMO is a very little in terms of planning. It takes a lot of time, but it's a small proportion of the planning. Now, have you engaged with the neighbours to reassure the neighbours? Because I think the fear we can hear in the room is about they are afraid about the tenant and the parking. So if you, as the applicant, will have engaged with neighbour, I think those people will not be in the room. Can you tell us if the owner of the house has engaged with everybody? Thank you.
The gentleman who is the project manager, as I understand, has discussed it with a number of residents. I understand the concerns, but I think where I've seen a lot of HMOs approved and refused in the town. Where they are, in my view, where they are causing problems is when you get a 2 or 3 bedroom house and you're trying to squeeze 6, 7, 8 bedrooms into it. You know, that's where parking requirements, they're higher than the parking requirement for the house. This parking requirement is the same as the existing house. A 5-bedroom house is a big 5-bedroom house. And they're not looking to cram bedrooms into basements. It's been scaled back. It's a 5-bedroom HMO.
Okay, thank you very much. Rupert?
Quick question on that. I thought the original application was for 8, but you said you're not looking to cram more people. Then why would you have applied for 8?
I haven't applied. The applicant, I don't know. They've had discussions with the officer. I think they're looking to maximise the property. It still met standards in terms of room sizes at 8. but they've scaled it back. So I don't know what motivated them to go in for 8. Certainly, an 8-bedroom HMO would still comply with the room sizes. The house is big enough to accommodate that, but they've gone for big rooms. I mean, the bedrooms are twice as big as some of them 3 times as big as they need to be. It's a big house.
Thank you.
Councillor Beardsley, final question.
Okay, thank you. It does say down here that usually when you're an HMO coming up, you do a parking beat survey, but that wasn't done by the applicant.
Yeah.
And it is now submitted that it's reasonable to infer that parking within the area is either insufficient or best minimal. So why didn't he do that?
They don't need to. There's no increase in parking demand because the parking requirement is the same for the house as it is for a 5-bed HMO. You can't just forget about the fact that it's a 5-bedroom house. That generates a demand for parking. There's not necessarily going to be one car in that house. There's no various appeal decisions that have been issued in the town have highlighted that not everybody who lives in an HMO owns a car.
That's genuine, but also you can also have couples that live in HMOs, and they can have 2 cars.
Again, you can make the assumptions, but the decision's based on the policy.
Councillor Beardsley, I've just got to remind you, it's 5 persons. So it won't be couples. It'll be 5 single people on their own. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Jonathan, if you want to come back on there.
I think everything's been covered in general. I think all the presentations have been quite thorough tonight, so there's nothing really further I want to add. All I would say is, in terms of parking, is that obviously the proposed situation needs to be compared to the existing situation in terms of number of bedrooms. Again, this has been covered in some detail, so one further thing would be the conservation area. Conservation haven't objected. Most of the works are internal, as we've said before, so there's nothing further to add than that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions to the officer? Rupert.
Thank you. This is something very confusing. This sentence on page 58. It's not a form of English I'm familiar with. It says the proposed use has a considerable impact to existing, and therefore, is there a word missing there? What does that mean?
Sorry, which paragraph are you referring to?
It says on the top of page 58, it says, I'll read it out, the amended application has been reduced to 5 occupants. That sentence I get. Then it says, the proposed use has a considerable impact to existing, and therefore it is considered that there would not be a significant impact on parking and highway safety. What does that sentence mean?
Could you give us the number? Because I think we were on
5.1.
5.3.
Under highways.
Okay, the amended application has been reduced to 5 occupants, so that's obviously quite apparent. It's reduced from 8 to 5. The proposed use is a comparable impact existing. What that's saying is the number of bedrooms is comparable, 5 versus 5, proposed existing, and therefore it's considered there would not be a significant impact on parking and highway safety. So it's comparing the position as a dwelling house to the position of a family to propose a HIMO, 5 bedrooms for first 5 bedrooms. So as Mr. Collerson suggested before, the level of parking is not increasing because the parking standard is very similar.
Right, it's okay.
Thank you. On parking and 7.1 specifically, within the paragraph and the SPD, I believe it states that 1 car per bedroom is the starting point, but goes on to say, in effect, unless the site is in a town centre and within 400 metres of a bus stop and 400 metres of local services and facilities. The key there being unless, so therefore it doesn't actually have to have 1 parking space. Am I understanding correctly?
Yeah, in this case, obviously, the sustainability criteria, as you quite correctly said, is the twofold. The proximity to the bus stop, which just meets, has been 90 metres or 2 bus stops. The site is slightly more than 400 metres away from the nearest town centre or local centre. So again, it doesn't meet the criteria, but it is slightly outside. But again, it is only marginally outside the recommended criteria. In this location, off-road parking can't be located, obviously, for obvious reasons, because it is on street. So view has to be taken in terms of the acceptability in highway terms.
Councillor Joyce.
Just one here. I can see a cycle path there. So obviously, is that part of a current active travel cycle scheme? Is it? I'm assuming. So potentially another 4 cars there, cars jutting out. That concerns me. But again, it's an active travel route there, cycle route. That's what obviously parking and that coexisting. No, it's just observation. So I just need to. I just noticed that. Okay.
No, I do not have any questions, sorry.
I'm going to stay with this highway thing because that appears to be the main stumbling block here. You'll be aware that 5 or 6 months ago, it came to light that when highways say no objections, that they've got no objections because they haven't had time to scrutinise the application, and in the members' briefing on the 23rd of June, we were assured that paragraph 4, there's going to be a number of changes, and these will include fuller highways comments on each application, comments specifically related to the application and confirmation that highways have indeed considered the application, as well as whether they have or have not visited the site. These comments will also include, for example, whether recent approvals for other nearby development have been taken into account. Bluntly, having read this and the slightly sketchy way it's phrased, unless you're going to tell me others, I can't even be confident that they've even visited the site, let alone scrutinised it.
I am unable to confirm concretely whether highways have visited the site. However, all I would say is we're dealing with a very experienced highways development engineer who has been passing comment on plan applications for a number of years at the council. I can't confirm what records he's used, but obviously he is very familiar with Northampton and the surrounding districts, and he has been employed with the council for some time.
Okay, thank you. You want to come back? No? Okay then. So, any comment? Anyone want to make a comment on this application? Councillor Hill. No, sorry, not from the public. The committee.
Thank you, Chair. I share a lot of concerns about this application. I think, as raised by members of the public and people on the committee as well. The worry I have is that I don't know whether we have enough material planning reasons to refuse it. I think the big issue we're going to have in terms of how we're withholding our decision in terms of planning inspectorate is that it's below the threshold for the 10%, and I think that will be the thing which will be the stumbling block. So at the moment, I'm torn. Thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Smith?
Yes, I will echo what Councillor Earls said. With what we have in front of us, in terms of policy, I can hear all the concern, but I cannot find a specific reason, a planning reason, a pure planning reason, where we could refuse that application. The officer has done they have done their job. So I can hear what people say, but with what we have in front of us and our planning policy, I cannot find a planning reason. So I don't know what to do. I will hear what the committee said, and I want somebody brave to propose something for the planning application. Otherwise, I will go with officer advice, and I hope people in the room will understand that that if people will understand that we cannot go with reasons that are not tested and robust. Otherwise, if it goes on appeal, it's really a bad mark for our council. So I am going to listen to what the committee said, and if somebody smarter than I am can find a good reason.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I do. I have concerns as well. I mean, I hear what the people in the room are saying tonight. We have very serious concerns about parking, but obviously I appreciate that it does tick the boxes for the policy. I'm just curious as to whether we do have a possibility of being able to refuse it on a conservation grounds. Councillor Smith has mentioned that we have done that in the past and it has been upheld on appeal. Now, what was the reasoning behind us doing that previously? And no, do we not have that option to us tonight that we could do that?
I'm sure if we put our heads together and find a reason, we could do that, if someone wants to come up with a reason. Any other comments? Councillor Joyce.
I'm not very aware that I think the Residents Association is very it's well attended. So for me, really, it's the concern, and I hear this, is obviously about the lack of consultation with residents. That always concerns me. So I just thought I'd make that point.
Thank you, Councillor Beers.
A couple of points, really. I think what's made me a bit sceptical about this application is the fact that, having seen the photographs that were sent to us last night about what's been done with the pointing and the very fact they've got a door that they're using as a bridge, which looks like quite an old antique door. And I just think if anybody has that contempt for an outside of a building, what's going to happen inside? And how, if they have that much contempt for the design of the building and the conservation area, are they going to be a good landlord? And I do feel that with what they've been demonstrating by the building work that's been done, which is obviously being supervised by somebody, and hopefully that's the owner, and the very fact the planning, and the very fact we haven't got a planning officer here tonight to justify his remarks, and there was no planning brief done, and I'm sorry, I can't support this, because I just don't think, if this person's going to be irresponsible with the outside of the building, how is he going to be responsible inside?
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Beers. We could get a couple more comments from Councillor Hill.
Well, I was actually going to make a proposal, Chair.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
given the question which started earlier, that we propose to reject the application on basis of it being within a conservation area, and I think we may as well also chuck in the parking concerns as well, just to beef up our concerns. I'm happy to propose that as an option.
And that's seconded by Councillor Cribbin. Okay. Right, so I have a proposal on the table to reject the application. Do I need to go for the floor first? Just take some legal advice here. I might have to go for first. Right. So the issue we have is because there is no comments from Highways or the conservation people on the detriment to it, that's where we're going to fall into a bit of hot water.
I guess it's difficult to know, but do we know what happened before in terms of how they were able to construct a reason around the conservation area? I'm guessing it must have been something to do with experience.
Yes, yeah, if I could, through you, Chair. The case I believe Councillor Smith referred to was recommended for approval by officers. It was overturned by the committee. There was a great deal of discussion and debate, and then through the chair, the discretion was left to officers to actually formulate a reason for refusal based on the unacceptable and detrimental impacts on the setting of the conservation area. On that particular one, again, it was discussed about parking, and the element of the way in which inspectorate had been going on parking elements was discussed. And on that particular one, it was the reason of the impact on the setting or detriment to the, or words that effect, on the setting of the conservation area, that argument was ran and was successful in that instance.
Can I propose that we actually turn down the application on the fact that the actual bit outside of the building has not been taken care of the same way. We can't do that. And it's a conservation area.
Sorry, through you, Chair, as I've mentioned already this evening, the investigation into what's going on outside of the building, the pointing and so forth, that's separate to this.
I know it's separate, but we're aware of it.
If we run that argument, then that may well run a significant risk to the authority being unreasonable.
Why?
What we've got in front of us is the application for the change of use of the building to the HIMO. It includes the alterations to the back of the property. The alterations or the work that's carried out to the front of the property is subject to a separate investigation and may well be subject to a separate plan application in its own right. We cannot, unfortunately, link the two together on this application.
We'll go with the existing one.
Right, well, everybody's going to first.
Very kind. Just on the highways point, because as long as it's minuted that we can't be certain that highways have even visited the site, then that will deal with that. I would suggest, or put another way, I don't think it's reasonable, is it, to not for highways people to have not visited, scrutinised it, and then for us to be prevented from objecting on highways grounds. That wouldn't be reasonable.
Thank you. Councillor Irving-Smith.
Yes, I did listen to what our legal officer said, and we have to be mindful. For example, that is a planning application, but it's my understanding if the person wants that things and to be an Airbnb, he can do it without any planning application. So at least with that, we might not be happy, but with the policy we have in front of us, at least you can control better what you have in front of you. And the thing is, I am uncomfortable to go just with the bland listed houses and highway. The officer said that the highway, we cannot say affirmatively if he has visited or not, but the person who normally deal with that is very experienced. So why will we think officers are doing their jobs? They are not against a thing. So I think if we just refuse with listed building and highway, we are not doing our job properly as a member of the committee, because we will not have listened to our legal counsel advice. But that is, and unfortunately, it's not what people in the room want to hear.
No, absolutely. Councillor Joyce, do you have comments to make then on
It's just something we might have been made aware of, that one of the resident has actually, I think, booked to speak, and we've maybe missed them.
And unfortunately, this was supposed to begin the meeting, because we've heard so much information now, I can't go back.
Okay, it's just what I'd raised that to you, Chair.
So, I'm going to draw things... Sorry, but you were not listed on my list at the start of the meeting, and you could have said, right, I'm going to bring this forward then. So the officer, can I ask you to be quiet, please? The officer's recommendation is to approve the application. Do I have a proposer for that recommendation? Councillor Matton, thank you. Do I have a seconder? I have a seconder, Councillor Irving-Swift. All those in favour? 2. Okay. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4 against. And abstentions? 2. So therefore, that's refused. But however, we do need a reason why we are refusing it.
If I may check. So, are you saying the conservation area reason can't be used? I mean, it is within a conservation area, and if we can refer to that as being part of our reason, then surely that's something which we can use a material planning reason.
Through you, Chair, if I may, we're not saying it can't be used.
Yeah.
It's just that obviously how successful that will be on appeal is difficult to. I mean, it could go. Well, it's going to go one of two ways from the inspection.
Yeah, I mean, but obviously that's always the case, isn't it, when you
yeah,
refuse
yeah,
an application?
Yeah.
So on grounds of the conservation area, We also, I think, highways amenity to the area as well, maybe. Councillor Cruz?
Just a point of order on the vote there. We voted for what the officers had put forward. We had a proposition which had been proposed and seconded that we were going to refuse it on conservation and or highways. So we heard the vote on what the officers were suggesting, but you've now said that the application's been refused. So I don't think it has. Technically, we're going to discuss. Yeah. So technically, for the people in the room, they're thinking, "Hey, we've won," because we've got to take the other vote to see whether or not that proposition actually succeeds or fails.
Yeah, Councillor Smith.
Yes, going back with the listed houses, my issue is that the listed officer didn't put any comment. The listed officer didn't say that would be detrimental to the area, and normally listed building officers are very pernickety. So if I would be very happy to go with that recommendation if we had a comment, negative comment from the officer, but we don't. The officer didn't comment negatively. Could I have clarification of that?
To strengthen this up so that we can go for a vote on it.
Yes, through you, Chair, if I may. The case I'm particularly thinking of, that I'm 99% sure it was the one that was appealed, therefore the application was refused. On that particular one, the conservation officer didn't object to that application either. And members went against up as a recommendation and refused the application, used that reason for refusal. There was amenity, and the impact on the conservation officer was the argument that was run at appeal, a written representation on that particular application, and the inspector actually upheld that one, therefore the recommendation remains. So on that particular one, again, not exactly the same comments, but a similar type of scenario, the conservation officer didn't object to the impact of the proposal on the setting of that particular conservation area.
Councillor Hill.
So just, are we okay then to go with my original proposal that we reject it on those grounds? And I think I had a second. And then can we take a vote on that?
Hold on, do I think for Anne's going? Peter?
Thank you. If the committee's deciding that it wishes to go the way of rejecting the application, I think it's worth pointing out that Principle 4 of the HMO SPD states that site needs to be located within 400 metres of facilities and services contained in a town centre, district centre, local centre or neighbourhood parade, and this site isn't. So if committee is going that way, I would suggest that that is a legal point of reason why we could reject.
Chair, through you. I would just say we've also been discussing conservation and highways, understandably, for this particular application. And I would just say to members that in terms of what's in the officer report, it states that no objections from conservation was received. So we have had comments, but no objections from the conservation officer, on the basis that works are mostly internal and extension is minor in scale. The highways side of matters in the officer report is, of course, that there is no objections, and I hear members' comments regarding how far highways have investigated or scrutinised the application, and that is not before us this evening. In respect of highways and compliance with the sustainability requirements, such as the 400 metres of facilities, it is acknowledged in the officer report that that is not completely compliant, but it is considered in the officer's report as sufficiently compliant. And any reasons for objections, reasons for refusal will need to be fully robust to defend any appeal if submitted.
Councillor Evans-Smith.
Well, especially in of the two that we have asked for, I am not very comfortable with, but what with Councillor Matton said, that reason seems to be clearer, and we could scrap the two first reasons, because if that is against policy 400 meters, that we have a policy that is clear, defined, and when you go on to appeal, the lesser reason, if it sticks, is the better position. So, and that I will be happy, if that is a reason, I will be happy to go with that. Can I have clarification? And after the proposer might want to change his proposal.
Any comments?
Yes, through you, Chair, if I may. There's nothing to, as was mentioned already, there's nothing to stop running a potential suggestion that it conflicts with the conservation area. Obviously it's the perception that it is, the perceived perception that it is. If we were to strike the conservation area element out and parking element out and run with the conflict with the HMO, HMO policy, sorry, the SPD, we're effectively saying that the principle behind it is acceptable. And I may be mistaken, but the notes I've been making this evening, it's the impact of it on the setting of the conservation area that seems to be one of the key elements here. And the difficulty there is if we take those elements away, we can't introduce it again at the appeal. So whilst it can be the wording can be very subjective to want of a better word, that could potentially, or may not carry sway with the inspector. Difficult to say at this stage, we haven't got appeal in front of us. The applicant may or may not appeal. But obviously just in the round, if members are considering what they believe is the reasonings, then obviously what has been discussed already by members is that the impact on the conservation area, the belief of the impact on the conservation area is unacceptable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Quick one. The planning officer, thank you for confirming that we're not certain if the highways officer has visited. Are you certain that the conservation officer has visited, and if so, do you know when he or she visited?
I have been in conversation with the conservation officer. His name is Gary Campion, he's a senior officer. He has visited the site. He has been involved in the recent enforcement complaint, and he's visited the site there as well. So I can't confirm what date he's visited the property, but I do know that he has been to the site.
Thank you.
Thank you. James, you've got a new proposal.
Well, I mean, so just to kind of come back to your point, can we have this as an extra part of our, or is it one or the other, basically? Is that what you're saying, really? Can we add all 3 points to strengthen our proposal?
Through you, Chair. If members want to run the 3 elements there, which have been discussed at length, the impact on the conservation area, the perceived, the impact on parking, and then the conflict with the HMO policy, then there's nothing to stop members where they choose to do so, proposing that and voting on that.
Okay, so James proposing, second by Councillor Criddle. All those in favour? Seven against. So are we agreed with that then? That's refused on those grounds, and then we'll get the wording and sent out. Okay, thank you very much. So I'll just allow those people to leave who want to leave on 7D before we go back to 7A. Is that a declaration of interest there? I think that's a bit of declaration of interest there. Okay then, right. We're going to move on then back to 7A, which is the land at Malabar Farm, Staverton Road, Daventry. And Michael, this is yours, I believe. So you're going to come and join us, and we'll get the presentation loaded. No speakers on this one, so this might be a bit quicker.
Much bigger.
You never know. Okay. Over to you, Michael.
we prepared a few slides. And the basis on this, if I just introduce the application, it is a reserved matter application following outline permission already granted for the Malabar Farm development. That in turn means there's quite a lot of sort of control already agreed in terms of a design guide and so on. But as a committee, you will be receiving a number of applications like this now into the future because development is progressing and the council, you know, clearly wants to see that in terms of, you know, the housing targets being achieved. But each time it comes in, obviously what we'll be doing is bringing this kind of presentation to you so that you can see how it's developing. Now, this is the site plan, and the critical, or the location along here is the Spine Road that goes from the A45 up to here, and it also, well, I'd now like to show you with a few other slides how it fits into the development. Actually, before I do that, I'd just like to point out what's very important about this site is its relationship to the new school site that's being provided as part of the development, and that's up here, and also the local centre, you know, which is going to include retail community uses and so on. And they've been located just up in this, together, in this kind of north-east corner of the site. And I'll explain a little in a moment how this approval of this site has come to include these roads and why that's important for bringing those things forward. So we have the next one, please. And this is just really as a reminder of what the sort of current location is. You've got the new development occurring up here, and then the site I've just shown you is all the etched in red, and this location here, Stepnell Spinney, is important because that is the major feature of the landscaping strategy. And there's a slide here which does show it, so you can see it. Next one. And I've just included this one so that you can see the principle of the Spine Road from here to here, from the A45 to the A425. And what we are concerned about is a part of the development that is abutting the Spine Road and contributing to the character of that. There's already been approval in relationship to the roundabouts, and what's called Phase 1A is in two parts. There's a small part here, obviously facilitating the roundabout, and that includes quite a few maisonettes and kind of concentration of that kind of development here. And then the other part of Phase 1A, which comes up here, is much larger. And I would say that very much relates to the character of the development that Spitfire, the developers, are trying to achieve, you know, with quite a green Arcadian type development, but obviously having to reconcile things like high car ownership and so on. Next one. I've only included this. This is to show you one principle that's important to understanding this site. This is the existing green parts of the site which are being retained and sort of used as the basis for the character of the development. These are all individual. This is very much at the original outline stage, so it has changed a bit. So our site is here, and the point about showing you this is you have this green space with walkway passing along the south side of the site we're looking at, and this accentuates the way in which the master plan has been developed so that these areas are sort of accessible and provide walking routes all the way through, culminating things like the Spinney, which is high quality. Sorry, sounding a bit like I was doing a pitch for this, but it is actually. I do like the way in which this has been a key point of the landscape, and you can access the walkways from the residential areas. Next one. Okay, this is unfortunately the wrong way around, so it's probably not worth trying to deal with that. So, they all are. Could we just go back one so I can see which ones I've missed? Yeah. Okay, this is... Yeah, this actually is... I'll use this as an example. We've lost a few slides, Chair, so my presentation will be a little shorter now. But this is the way in which the principles established sort of following the outline permission have meant that the different parts of character or different character identities which are there are being introduced consistently throughout the whole development. And the importance, that for example is town, and there's another one called core which goes that way, and then the next, if you just hold that there, that's the two ones, town and core, and they are the higher density type development, and the idea of the town was that it does reflect more the actual existing character of Daventry, and the core has been developed to actually, it's one of its main functions is to provide a kind of identity to the development that goes along the spine road. And so the next one, yeah, so that's the kind of town and core house types, which, whilst the brickwork is sort of red based, it is quite dark, always with a dark grey slate type roof. And I'll explain a little bit in a moment how that has affected the development. And if you could then go on to the next one, which is the edge, and this is where the development is intended to sort of present more of a face towards the countryside. So we're looking at the edge being on the south side of that red line. And if you notice there's this line of housing all the way along here, all the way along the bottom, which is intended, to sort of present an identity to the area, to the countryside, bearing in mind the Spinney and everything just to the south. So it reads as a good break between housing and countryside, but is of a consistent character. Parking is always a problem with this kind of density, and there are areas where they've had to introduce parking spaces along here, and so on. So if you could go on to the next one, and again, so those are the edge house types, and you compare it or remember the difference if you remember the other that scheme. And that kind of the identity for the edge is going to be consistent, throughout the whole development. Next one, please. And this is how they amalgamate. This red line here is along the spine road, and that's the elevation up here. And the difference that comes, what they've done with the design for the town, which is closer to the A45, what they've done there is they've put the development together, so it's got an urban feel to it. But when you go further into the development, the core development opens up, so that then you have the houses separated by the parking. You know.
Are those houses all flats?
Pardon?
Are those houses all flats?
Houses.
They're all houses.
We'll come on
Well,
to
this is
questions
flats
later,
here.
Councillor Data. We'll listen to the presentation first, then we'll come on to questions.
Okay. I'll try and remember the slide.
And then down here, there are, this is the edge facing outwards, and there are flats in that, a mixture of houses and flats along here. Okay. And then that's, say it's a typical view, but it's the main view sort of presented to the council, which shows the this is part of the town development with that, and that's the block of flats on the corner there, and then the pathway, the roadway down here then leads to a pathway that leads to the spinning. Okay.
Thank you very much. We do have one speaker on this who registered to speak. It was mentioned in our pre-meeting yesterday, but was not on the list, and that's Francis Keenan. So if you'd like to come and address the committee, again, you've got 3 minutes. Sorry you was missed off the list. And you're speaking for the applicant.
Yes. So, hello, my name is Francis Keenan. I'm a planning manager at Spitfire Homes. So this Phase 1B Reserve Matters application comprises of 68 dwellings, of which 27 are affordable, and forms the second phase of the Daventry South West Sustainable Urban Extension. The Reserve Matters follows the established parameters regarding land use, movement, building height and green infrastructure, which were established through the 2021 outline consent, which followed the allocation through Part 2 of the local plan. The layout and detailed design elements accord with the design code, which was approved in July 2022 by Strategic Planning Committee. The design code separates Phase 1B into 3 main character areas: the town, the core and the edge, each with their own distinctive material palette and design reflecting their proximity to either Daventry Town Centre or the rural villages. The proposed apartment block and terrace townhouses located in the centre of Phase 1B around the public square are positioned close to the back edge of the Spine Road to create an intended townscape. This corresponds to the close proximity of Phase 1B to the proposed mixed-use local centre planned for future phases of the Malabar Farm development. Resident parking is planned within a series of formal parking courts concealed from the Spine Road. Each court has been carefully planned to receive maximum surveillance through the inclusion of well-designed houses, maisonettes and flats over garages, each promoting high levels of active frontages and exposed facades. Similarly, the dwellings have been carefully configured to ensure future occupants' privacy is not compromised. Garden sizing has been designed to balance amenity and the intended urban setting, and it should be noted that this phase sits immediately alongside approved parkland totalling some 19 hectares. In accordance with policy H08 of the local plan, all of the dwellings are built to national space standards, provide the legally required level of accessible, adaptable and wheelchair user accommodation, and meet the required higher water efficiency of 110 litres per person per day. All houses will be highly efficient and in excess of the 2022 building regulations. Each house will be fitted with an air source heat pump, providing a sustainable low carbon source of heating, and EV charging points will be fitted at the time of completion. The application also includes the road serving the school, local centre and the future Phase 1C. The inclusion of these is necessary to allow highway and other infrastructure to be installed, which will help to facilitate timely delivery of these other phases. The Reserve Matters application was subject to consultation and there were limited objections that have been addressed through revisions to the design. This includes the objection from Highways, which has been resolved as part of the application process. The Highways officer confirmed last week, on Thursday the 28th, that following the removal of the footway around the small parcel of open space to the north of the Spine Road, their final objection has been removed and therefore the Highways Authority has no outstanding objections.
Okay.
Approved.
Thank you very much. And just stay there so we can get questions. Councillor Urban-Swift?
Yes, in the revision plan, if I understand correctly, when we looked at when we had the presentation, it's a lot of bricks, and there are brick changes due to the closure in your buildings. So are we all satisfied? Because if you suddenly have white brick instead of red brick or whatever, it changed really the aspect for integrating with Staverton. So is that being resolved, that matter? Or you still don't know which kind of bricks?
No, we know what type of bricks. We've picked the most similar to ones that we had chosen originally. It's just unfortunately the manufacturer is closing down the plant. So they're the same and they've been approved by the case officer.
Thank you. Councillor Freeman?
Thank you, Chair. Question to the applicant. I'm just curious. The first question is about the 110 litres per day. Perhaps this was my ignorance, but how does that enforce? Is that because it's sort of like potentially you're only going to end up using 110 per person, or does it actually cut you off halfway through a shower, that sort of thing? I'm just curious as to what that's the first question.
Okay.
And a supplemental to that is we hear that you're having EV points put in. When I was reading the papers, I think I picked up that no solar arrays are going to be put on the roofs and things. Now that's something we as a council always try and push for new developments, especially with larger developments where it's matters of scale mean that you can actually put them in at fairly low cost. So what question to the applicant really is, can we not have those on there? On as many of the properties that we can. Is that something that we can, if we don't put it on as a condition, whether we can actually sort of like persuade you to consider doing that anyway? So,
yes, through you, Chair. The potential requirement or the inclusion of PV or solar arrays on the roof of the properties is something that ideally should have been put on as part of the outline application. This is the reserve matter for this particular phase, and there's limited scope in terms of what we can legitimately ask for or put on there. Unfortunately, we can't ask for or try and insist upon it at this stage. This is something that ideally should have been addressed or readdressed as part of the outline application. Thank you.
Yeah, just coming back on that, I'm saying, can we plead with the developer if we can't put it on?
Just throw them. Okay, Councillor Beardsworth.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you're getting ground floor heat pumps in. The other thing we've found out recently that was in the research is that unless you have solar as well, it's not sufficient to keep people warm. So I'm just wondering what sort of insulation you're putting into the homes, what sustainable level you're going to, and what price do you consider affordable? And I'm glad to hear you're doing homes for life. That means wider door frames, light switches halfway down, those sort of things, which are much better use of property if you're doing that. So those are the questions I need to answer.
Just to remind you, prices are coming to, I'm afraid. We're not discussing how much the property is on the market for. That's not a planning.
I'm just asking as a question.
Sorry, Sean.
Through you, Chair, if I can go back on some of those points that Councillor Beardsworth mentioned there, the level of insulation and solar efficiency of the dwellings, that's dealt with separately by separate legislation and building regulations. That's not part of the planning remit.
So the answer to that would be that we're in excess of the 2022 building regulations, and that would inform insulation and matters of that.
Thank you very much. Anything to come back on there?
Councillor did mention.
Well, it was just the answer to my first question about the 110 litres per person per day. I'm just curious to know how. That's obviously a building regulation or something. How does it actually work in practice? I mean, just for my and the committee's sort of like knowledge.
I'm unfortunately not able to answer that.
Is it something
that
the officers
we'll
can
go
say
to
anything
officers'
about?
questions in a moment. Okay. So thank you very much.
Yes.
We'll release you from your.
Okay.
Your time. Come back to us. Maybe you'll be able to answer the litre question.
I have to confess that one it's beyond me. I was hoping to find out myself. I don't know, but I was just going to come back on affordable because the councillor mentioned affordable housing. Just might be helpful if I explain the situation, and that is that at the time of the original outline and 106, the overall level of affordable is 25% across the site. The scheme that's in front of you now, there is 40% affordable with 60% market. That's, to an extent, has to be interpreted carefully because that's numbers of units, not necessarily the size of units. So in this particular mix, it's saying that 40% does include one-bedroom maisonettes, whereas the private will be larger houses. But that's taken care of because within the framework of the overall strategy, it's felt that the flats, the place to provide flats and the smaller units is over in this part of the development, closer, to the school, the local centre, and so on. But not to the exclusion that dominates the character, or the result dominates the character. But over the whole site, there is a discussion going on with the applicants, led by the strategic housing officer, which is actually agreeing what the composition of the affordable is going to be for the scheme as a whole. And I did notice in my inbox this week there was an email from on behalf of the applicants just proposing what their overall mix would be. That would come back to this committee, if you like, when it was known or when that was likely to be agreed, because then that would be relevant to your considerations of each and every phase that follows.
Can I just ask a question? Yes, you can. You just said that you're going to put the one-bedroom flats closer to the school.
Well, to the centre, local centre, as well as the school.
Yeah, because basically people live in one-bedroom flats don't have children,
Mm-hmm.
do they?
Yeah. No, I wouldn't say it's just that it flowed from me because the school and the centre are together.
Oh,
yeah.
I see. So they're close.
But it wasn't. It was more to do with that being that part of the development, which is closer to the town than other parts.
Okay.
So that people can get buses into the centre or whatever.
Okay.
And the local centre is there with the, sort of retail restaurant use, which would be, good to serve them, and that would, but that would blend in then more with the rest of the scheme, which we know with the emphasis on the larger housing, further away from that part. But of course, recognising that the people in the houses want to go to the school.
Yes.
So,
the solicitors
but then
come
there's
on
nothing
to
in
it,
the
yeah.
development that's so large that nothing isn't walkable.
Okay.
And that's... Is that okay, Jeff, if I just mention? Yeah? So if I just sort of mention, again, the work that's being done on the school side, because that's seen as obviously we see that as an important point of the delivery, and there are thresholds in the 106, indicating at what point different parts of the school site should be made available. And the benefit of this particular scheme is that, so what you are agreeing to is the roads agreed coloured in grey, which do not enclose development at the moment. But by agreeing to those at the moment, that enables the developers to open up the site, because what they can do, and they are doing at the moment, is agreeing what levels, because the site is quite a steep slope. And so what's crucial from the council's point of view is to know what the levels are going to be all the way along that frontage and all the way down there, so that the school site can be designed so it's level. Okay, and that's what they're required to do under the 106, but at this point, we've got that certainty.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Fitzgerald, here to clarify something.
Thank you, Chair. This just ties into that, Councillor, that may assist you on the report. Excuse me, at paragraph 7.6, page 11, onwards, it details the house types and neighbourhood character areas anticipated for this part of the development, which has also been mentioned in the slides with the different character areas within the 68 properties being proposed tonight. On top of that, it's 7.7 in the officer report references housing mix, and it gives a breakdown there of the range of and sizing of houses in terms of bedroom sizings, not in physical terms. And it's 7.9. This may assist you, Councillor. There's a relatively high provision of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments within phase 1. Logical location for these apartments is near to the local centre and subsequently Daventry town itself, providing greater opportunities for access by walking and cycling, with an anticipation that there will be limited provision of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments in further phases beyond that approved in phase 1A and phase 1B. So that's the rationale behind where they're wanting to look at the 1 and 2 bedroom apartments on this side, if that assists.
Okay, question from Councillor Irvine-Smith.
No, it's not a question, but...
Okay, we'll come on
no,
to...
it's a
Well, hold
question.
on, we'll come on to comments in a moment. If it's not a question...
Well, it is just a question of procedure, because next to me it's Councillor Frost, who is a councillor for Staverton, and normally he will be asked to speak if he has something to ask before we do, so we know how we feel or how his ward feel. And I think that is part of our way of running a meeting.
Well, Councillor Frost can put his hand up and
Well,
speak.
I know he's too shy.
I'll be speaking in a minute if that's right, but I'm obviously listening into...
Okay, we get a question from Councillor Joyce.
Yeah, it's just a sort of question, query really. I see it's a primary school, so is it a 1 form entry or 2 form entry? Because I'm concerned about obviously air quality and pollution, potentially. Kids getting dropped off, and so we obviously this is very relevant because we discussed this in full council last week.
Right. Okay, well, I have to say, I came in the door tonight and I thought, is it 1 form or 2? I believe it's 2, but I will come back to you and confirm that.
Sorry, Chair, through you, if I may. I mean, I think we tend to be slightly going off script here. I mean, it's the reserve matters. The provision of the primary school is secured to the outline, and this 106 would secure that. Forgive me, I haven't got a copy of the 106 up in front of me at the moment, but that provision, whether 1 form or 2 form entry, was at the time of the determination of the outline. That was something that the Education Department fed into and were quite instrumental behind the drive for that, and that's why it was included in the 106. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to comments then. Okay, any comments?
Yeah.
Councillor Frost.
Can we get some clarification on this highways matter? Because the highways have objected, but we learnt a few minutes ago that they resolved their objections. What's the SP? What's the deal?
Well, the highways have been fully involved in the evolution of this scheme. Okay? The scheme has actually gone through at least one major design review, which occurred sort of at the end of last year, because the application's been in since 2022. And part of that was the highways had a number of concerns. One was about, if you like, the balance of parking, or the way in which parking was being provided, and the number of spaces.
Exactly, that's in
Pardon?
That's in the report.
Yeah. But the final point, which was covered by the addendum tonight, was their withdrawal of the objection that was referred to by the applicant's agent of what the applicants submit is a proposal for the land or for the parts of the highway which need to be adopted. And there was up here, and if you can see, where the road from the local centre comes up to here, meets the Spine Road, there's a small park here where bits of landscaping are provided just to announce, commemorate this place. And what the developers had included was a footpath going along the northern part of this open space, the western part of that open space, for adoption. That was it. And this Highways came back and said, well, no, that doesn't make any sense from an adoption point of view, and asked for it to be withdrawn. So that was withdrawn.
Any more comments?
Just a quick question about a slide during your presentation. It's about the fifth or sixth one in, if we could bring that up again. Yeah, one of those ones. You made reference to the houses above, and you described them as new houses, almost suggesting that was part of the development.
No, it's just following the existing development north of Stamford Road.
Okay.
Yeah, that was obviously, from a planning point of view, it sets a scene, which is the first part of the urban extension, but it's nothing to do with the current applicant.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the officer's recommendation is to grant permission subject.
Can I just ask a question on 7.13?
We have done questions, we want to comments, but if you could ask a question quickly, Councillor Bailey.
Because it's written in bold.
What?
On the plan.
7.13.
7.13.
General layout.
Yeah.
7.13.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
7.30.
The LHA notes.
Yeah.
Just want the planning officer to explain why it's written in bold. And it says it does not appear to conform with this requirement.
So just check it's 7.13.
Yeah, 7.13. It's
Yeah.
written in bold, and Councillor Beard was a bit concerned that it's written in bold.
But it's not that
Yeah.
it says it does not appear to conform with this requirement.
Yeah. But basically, there's an ideal form of court parking, because I had to sort of study this because I picked the application up, only a few months ago, and this was an issue that had come up, because, as you say, I was confused a bit by the August 22. That's what the Highway Authority quoted. So what they're describing is a situation where if you have court parking, which is in group parking, that should be visible from the apartments that it's serving, from a security point of view. In this case, there's been you haven't got the purity here of a design, which is apartments with courtyard and houses with integral parking, and that purity is lacking because, to follow the design ethos, where you had the houses enclosing the parking further away from the A45. What they did was to link the housing up on the Spine Road closer to the A45, so it's quite close together to give an urban feel to that particular part. And that meant that those were houses, and that meant that parking associated with those houses couldn't be provided as it was up here, where you have house parking. You had to go to courtyard. And they were getting, it was getting difficult to see exactly how the surveillance was going to work. So what evolved, were these courtyards here, which are surrounded or faced onto by houses and flats. So they're getting the surveillance that way. But what the local highway authority said is, okay, given the location, given the design you're trying to achieve, we agree, but we are not saying that's going to be acceptable in the future as a way of developing the site. So they said there were special circumstances here which enabled them to deviate from the bit in dark print. But they said that has to be recognised as an exception, and we expect them to, or expect you to revert to normal approach in the future.
Okay, Okay, thank you very much. The officer's recommendation is to grant permission subject to conditions. The proposer to accept the officer's recommendation, Councillor Hill, seconded by Councillor Smith. All those in favour? That's 7. Against? One against. And no abstentions. Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to 7B, which is work from premises, East Haddon Road, Great Green, Daventry. Just to remind committee what I do, we listen to the presentations, we listen to speakers, we ask speakers questions, yeah? Then we go back to clarification from the officer, we then ask the officer questions, and then we make comments. If we keep to that simple principle, we'll get through the meeting a lot quicker. Thank you.
Chair, can I just ask a very quick question before we go ahead on this application? I see it was referred by Councillor Bignell. Is he registered to speak?
He's not.
Right, well, as far as I'm aware, then if he was the person who called it in, then it should be deferred to officer recommendation. It shouldn't be at committee. And that's something which I've been told before and had happened to me in forces, as you well know.
But then we change the constitution again. Yeah. So what is the latest on the constitution? Yeah.
Through you, Chair, if I may, that was something that was discussed at the planning committee meeting or before this, and it has been clarified. I've looked at it myself, and I can clarify the constitution states that if a councillor calls an application in, even if he, she, they do not register to speak, committees still have to hear the application in full and make the decision on the evening.
It went back after Cheryl's situation. Yeah. Okay, Erica, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This application is to change the use of the existing land from commercial to residential for the construction of a single dwelling and the demolition of the existing commercial buildings. The application is a resubmission of a previously withdrawn application to address the concerns raised by the consultees. The application site lies north of the village of Great Brington, with the current access to the north of the site. The proposal includes moving the access further south. The site is also seen from, it is south of St Mary's Church, which is a Grade 1 listed church, and Great Brington Conservation Area. Both these are set at a higher level than the site. The site is divided into two, with the northernmost part that was used for the commercial activities, and the south of the site is set out as an orchard. The dividing line is marked by poplar trees. This layout shows the layout of the proposed dwelling and the location of the new access, and it shows existing, where it's green, it shows existing access is closed up, the orchard area to the south of the poplar trees, and the blue lines on the plan demarks the existing buildings. Next slide. This is the layout, there's a closer layout of the actual development site. Again, you can see on the south of the site is the new access, and the green area is where the existing access is to be closed up and returned back to grass. Next one. The top picture is the north elevation, which faces the rear of the site. The bottom elevation is the courtyard, the front elevation, and that faces the road fronting. The pink line on the buildings show the height of the previous withdrawn application, that shows how it was addressed concerns raised by the conservation officer. Next slide. This elevation shows the rear west elevation facing open countryside, and the bottom one is the courtyard front elevation facing the church and the conservation area. Next. This is a visualisation showing with the two-storey element facing the road and the single-storey element facing the church and the conservation area. Next slide. There's an aerial view showing the proposed dwelling in the wider landscape along with the new access. And next one. And this is the aerial view from the direction of the church and the conservation area. And the final ones are the existing buildings that are on the site, and the site as it is. And the next slide shows the views of the site, the current views of the site from the churchyard.
Okay, that's it. Okay. So we've got one speaker on this, Councillor Smith, and then we'll get the questions, okay? So I'm going to call on Andy Lord, who's going to address the committee. And again, just introduce yourself, say who you are, and then your 3 minutes will begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Andy Lord. I'm the Development Director of Clayson Homes, Country Homes, who are the applicant tonight before you.
Okay, 3 minutes start.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman and Councillors. My name is Andy Laws, as I've said. I'm the Development Director for Clayson Country Homes, who are the applicant of the proposal before you tonight to replace a series of rundown commercial barns with a single dwelling of vernacular design in the form of an agricultural setting. The proposed scheme is the result of lengthy and positive discussions with the West Northants Council officers, which have shaped the form, scale and architectural detailing you see before you. The application has case officer support with no objections from either the West Northants Heritage Officer, most importantly, Northants County Highways or West Northants Ecology. We firmly believe that the application presents the opportunity to remove an incongruous but lawful commercial use in the open countryside, which is visually harmful to its setting, and in return replace it with a single dwelling which is noted by the case officer of being of exceptional design and is of a similar footprint to the existing building on site. I'd just like to draw your attention to the committee report 7.23, and in there Erica states, it is therefore considered that the proposal contributes to the long vista identified in the Great Brinkton Conservation Area. Additionally, it is considered that the proposal would not harm the openness of the area and is therefore in line with the policies which are quoted. The concerns of the Parish Council with regard to the setting of the Grade 1 listed church are very eloquently dealt with there, I think, as well as no objection from the Heritage Officer. They both note the appropriateness of a single dwelling and the betterment for the removal of the existing buildings on site. The Parish Council also have concerns about any future development on the orchard, which is noted as being the southern part of the site, and which is closer to the Grade 1 listed building mentioned. Again, the ultimate protection for this part of the site lies with West Northants Council, who would clearly never support any application, as is noted by the Heritage Officer and in further discussions with the council that we've already had. The proposed scheme would preserve and enhance the existing landscape of the site with a new tree planting regime of native species, which would bolster both the perimeter and the existing line of the poplars. And as mentioned, the access is being moved to a better location within the 30 miles an hour. I would urge you to support this application, which has officers' recommendation, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, delighted to see that you've done a lot of homework and background change on this. Could you outline to the committee the change you did to try to conform with what the Heritage Officer wanted? Because it looks like there was some alterations, and I think it's always quite encouraging to see.
Yes, yeah. So as Erica displayed in the original application, the original application was a bigger building and had slightly more overt detailing, I'll say. There were dormer windows. We've replaced those for heritage-style veluxes. We've reduced the scale of the footprint, the height of the ridge, and of course all of these things contribute to the setting and the view, the important view from the church. We've also taken away a 3-storey car block sort of garage that sat against the road, the existing road, and we've replaced it with, as you can see there, a more discreet single garage. Obviously, all permitted development rights would be removed if it was to be approved, and we are also happy with all the conditions which would relate to the landscaping and detailing, etc., to be further approved.
Thank you. Councillor Swift.
I might, so forgive me if I ask a silly question, but it seems that the poplars are quite important for the scheme, those line of poplar.
Yes.
So are they going to be TPO'd? Because I think if they seem so important to the scheme. Don't ask me why, because for me they look a bit incongruous in the English countryside, but for me that is more France or Italy. But it seems very important for everybody. So if they are important, I think, could we put, or did I miss something, could we add a condition that they are protected?
I think it's more a question to the officers. If you'd like to answer that.
Yeah.
Well, what I would say is the application, all of those trees, which, as you say, are critical to the setting, are shown to remain, and we're proposing a strategic landscape scheme which would sit within them and bolster them of native species as well. That would be approved at conditional stage if we get a decision.
Any further questions? Councillor Joyce?
Probably not relevant, but how old is the church?
It's a very good question. Thank you for putting me on the spot. I'm going to say 15 something. I know that it's got links with George Washington, and it is obviously critical to the area. Hence the reason we did a lot of research for the views and how it's designed from that position. So.
Thank you very much. Anything you want to come back on there, Eric? Any other questions? Oh, sorry. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Anything you want to come back on?
As regarding the poplar trees, I have put down as a condition for the landscaping, so that, you know, that would be part of the landscaping scheme, and that would be insistent on that. So we can do that, but I'm not the tree officer, so I can't say whether we can put tree preservation order on there. That would have to be something looked at different from this application.
Any other questions to the officers?
Just to come back for the TPO, because if our officer, which for that part of the world is Michael Vinton, has not TPOs those trees already, it must have a view. But for me, could we put a condition with a view when you do the landscaping, with the agreement of the conservation officer? Could he assess if there could be TPO and he could see it as a group, because that is very often what Michael Vinton used to do. So I don't know if that is possible, Erica. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Can we do that? Can we add something in there?
It's difficult to put a condition on a decision where members to approve the application that would require a separate order in its own right, which obviously TPO legislation is different. It's part of the planning remit, but obviously it's different to a full application. That's what's happening in this particular instance. We can certainly ask Michael if that's the case, but obviously we can't compel that or require that as part of a decision where members to approve an application. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So, yes.
For the planning officer, what do you make of the parish council's points that, about their neighbourhood plan not having been taken into account?
When I did do the report, I did take into the account of the neighbourhood plan. So I did take that into account. The points that the where was it?
I think what I'm asking specifically is, have you read the neighbourhood plan, and do you have any sympathy for their view that this is completely, you know, contradictory to it?
No, just bear with me 2 seconds. Great Brington got a neighbourhood plan?
And their
I
comments.
think you'll find it, they're talking about the conservation area action plan, not the neighbourhood plan. They haven't got a neighbourhood plan.
Sorry then, can I tweak my question to say yeah, I should have said conservation area management plan. You're quite right, apologies.
Yes, they have, and yes, they did. The documents they did submit a heritage statement, and in that heritage statement, they did take into the account the conservation action management plan, and I've taken that into consideration, and the details are in my report.
Hey, Councillor Beard, you've got a question on East Haddon?
No, it's not East Haddon. East Haddon didn't have any objection. What I was going to say is, having read the description of what's there now, I can't see why this isn't a tremendous improvement on...
Okay. Well, hold on then. We'll come on to comments. Thank you for bringing it on. So we're going to have comments. Councillor Beard,
Thank you.
Your comment.
Well, having read the description, Chair, of what's there now and it isn't being used, I can't see anything that would say not to do these buildings, because I think they'll enhance the area. And surely it's best to look at on something nicer than a shack with a tin roof. You know, it's going to be something more pleasant than that. And as long as the poplars are kept as a fringe to the actual, and I'm sure they will be, because they do add a distinction to the area. So hopefully that will be the case.
Any other comments? Yes.
Councillor Beardsworth, through you, Chair. May I just clarify that at the moment the condition for this application before the committee relates to landscaping in general. There isn't a specific provision in this, as I understand it, related to the poplars themselves, and that will need to be separately dealt with.
Okay. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd be minded to support this application. I think it offers a vast improvement on what's there currently, as Councillor Bearsworth referred to. I'm also very impressed with how the planning applicant has engaged with West Northants. Reading, it looks like they've taken on extensive suggestions and tweaked it, and yeah, I think it's a great application and one I'd like to support.
Okay, any further comments before we move to the vote?
We propose...
Okay, so Councillor Everett is going to propose, and Councillor Hill second. All those in favour? That's... In favour, or against? Against, and no abstentions. So that's approved. So we're now going to move on to 7C, which is 266A, Main Road, Dustin. And Andy, it is your two.
Yeah, the application at 266A Main Road, Dustin, is for a new bungalow as part of an addition to an existing development that has a separate private access road. So that shows the site on Main Road. There are existing dwellings here and in this area. This was taken in February, so that shows the access road up towards one of the new bungalows that the developer, the applicant, has already provided. A little shot of the bungalow whose garden is being used for the new bungalow. It's the shot of the development described in the adjoining land, sharing the same private access road. Here, right?
Yeah. If you speak to one plan better, that's it.
Next, please. So these are sort of various shots of the garden area. Particularly like to take note of the, I think it's a sort of type of cedar tree, but the applicant actually knows a lot more about trees than I do. But that was originally proposed to be removed, and through discussion the applicant has moved the garage and retained that tree, which I think is quite an interesting and exceptional tree more to the point, it was planted by the person who occupies the bungalow, who still will remain there. So everyone's a winner, I think. Next, please. Again, another shot of the tree. Shot of the hedgerows. There's very mature hedgerows around the site which have been very well maintained. The application will retain those. Then we come to the scheme itself. As you can see, it's similar design to those that are currently built and occupied, and I believe relatively popular in the area. Next, please. Well, that may be it. All right. So the reason it's before committee is that Councillor Hinch called it in. He cited conflict with the Duston Neighbourhood Plan, highway safety, potential loss of trees, overdevelopment, which is in fact exactly the same objection as Duston Parish Council had. That's my presentation.
Lovely. So we've got one speaker on this. Mr. McGeary. Mr. McGeary, yes, like to join us, please. And say, just introduce us to who you are, and then your 3 minutes will start.
My name is Michael McGeary. I'm representing the applicant 2010 Developments in support of the application.
Okay, thank you. Your 3 minutes start now.
The application is fully supported by the officers. The driveway has been existing now for about 3 or 4 years. 2010 Developments bought the original site where 2 dwellings were built by them a few years ago. They bought the site with planning permission, granted then by the Borough Council. In constructing those, they were approached by another applicant, another owner, a garden owner, and 2010 then developed that garden for another dwelling, making 3 dwellings, and now they've been approached by a 4th owner, which is the man who lives in 266A, and they would like to develop that part of the garden, but then it will mean 5 dwellings off a single private road. So the private road has been in use now for 3 or 4 years, and of all the statutory consultees, no one's offered any negative comments about it except Duston Parish Council. And I'm going to quote here from an email sent from Councillor Nigel Hinch to Rachel Oxley. It begins with, Duston Parish Council has sent the following to me on grounds to call in. And they've put, this application contradicts Duston Parish Council's neighbourhood plan. And then there's a piece from their development standards that they require, and which they think it disregards in part. But the critical bit on the bottom of this says in highlighted type, the driveway would be located on or near a busy junction next to busy shops, 2 bus stops in close proximity to the drive. So the driveway exists, and it existed then, and I think the parish council really perhaps didn't go down to view the site, and some confusion has arisen, because this driveway has been successfully used for a number of years. It's a busy road, but there's no difficulties with visibility or anything like that.
Okay, thank you very much. Just remain there if you've got any
Yeah, sure.
questions for you. Any questions? Mr. McGeary?
Just one. I don't know if you know this or whether I've got something in the back of my mind, but I thought you could have 5 residential properties off one private road. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
That's okay.
And this will be the 5th.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Any questions to the officer? Any comments? Is it a question or comment?
Well, just a question. You mentioned that tree, and I am again with my tree. If that has been the famous, which I don't know, I don't think it's a cedar. It's not a cedar. It's a pine of some kind.
It's a cedar.
Yeah.
It's a Himalayan. It comes from, it's native to the Himalayas.
Yes.
And it will eventually grow to about 40 or 50 metres.
Thank you. So if that is very important, again, could we ask our conservation, our tree officer to go and Tipido, because like that it will reassure.
Yes, could I, sorry, through,
Yes.
could I advise you that on the previous scheme, I haven't got the email with me, but the applicant requested on the previous scheme that a tree be preserved, asked the tree officer to preserve it, and he wouldn't do it. So we will have I think we have a new tree officer helping us. So I can certainly make the request, but it's certainly the applicant's intention to retain trees.
It will be retained.
Okay, lovely. Okay, so if there's no comments, then we'll go for the officer. Well, the officer's recommendation is to grant permission subject to conditions. So, proposer, Councillor Swift, seconder, Councillor Beard. All those in favour? It's unanimous this time. Everybody. Okay, well, that's approved. So we're now going to move on to 7E, which is the Mountfield High Street in Colworth. And this is one where Councillor Swift has interest. And Rebecca, you're presenting this, and then we will hopefully. Okay, Rebecca.
Thank you, Chair. The property is located in Colworth, which is a small village about 7 miles north of Brackley and is in a conservation area. The village has a mixture of building styles comprising farmhouses, outbuildings and 2- and 3-storey cottages being the dominant buildings, with varying forms, heights, ages and styles of the building. If we can go to photo 2. This shows the proposed plans. The building is a modest sized property and provides 4 bedrooms, and the proposal is not to increase the number of bedrooms, it's just to improve the layout and usability of the space. And the next photo, please. This is a photo of the proposed carport, car shelter, sorry. Next photo. This is a rough outline of an aerial photo of the property. And the next photo. This is the street, the photos show the street scene. The first one, this one here, sorry, showing the entrance to Mountfield, and the second one's just showing the view down the stream. It's quite an enclosed view down the road there. And the next photo, that's showing the front of the property, and the second photo is showing with the trees, that's showing where the car shelter will go. And the next photo, that's the rear of the property, and that's where the main development is going to be, the main extension, and that photo that's showing just the view down the garden. The application seeks to construct a single-storey rear extension, inclusion of new roof lights to the front of the property and solar panels to the rear of the property as well, and the front carport. The main development is to the rear of the property, which is not be visible from the public domain or the conservation area.
Thank you very much. There are no speakers on this. Any questions to Rebecca? Oh, no, public speakers, Councillor.
Oh, okay.
Any questions to Rebecca?
Oh, yes.
Councillor Pitt.
Are any trees going to be lost doing this?
Not with this plan, no. There have been previous applications detailed in the report to trim some of the trees that are shown in the front of the property. Yeah. Some of that work has, if we go back to one of the slides showing the street scene, that one, you can see one of the trees just slightly. That's been trimmed, but they've done all the work to sort of tidy up to the trees. I think the property was empty for quite a few years, so they've just done some sort of maintenance of the trees, but the majority of those trees will be staying.
Any more questions to Rebecca? Okay, then we'll move on to comments. Any comments to Rebecca? Bruce?
I propose we grant permission subject to conditions listed.
Okay, propose and have a seconder. Councillor Hill, all those in favour? And that's all approved unanimously, so that's great. Thank you very much. The end is in sight. 7 F. I was going to say, Eamon, this is yours. Cypress View, 20 Bruton Road, Long Huckby.
Thanks, Chairman. As you'll see from the description, the application is a demolition of existing dwelling and construction of 4 detached dwellings. The original application that's submitted was for 5 dwellings, but through negotiations with officers, it's been amended to 4 detached dwellings. Just go to the next slide. Site, as you'll see, just lies to the south of the village centre itself, next to the and abutting the conservation area. It's a large, modernish dwelling in a large plot on the Brington Road, which is primarily characterised by linear development. If you go to the next one. And the proposal is effectively to demolish the existing property and create 2 frontage dwellings, much in keeping with the established pattern of development along Brington Road, and to construct 2 modest dormer-style dwellings at the rear. No objections have been received from conservation officers or the Highway Authority, nor indeed the tree officer, and subject to the conditions set out in the report, Chairman. We're satisfied the proposal is compliant with policy and represents a sustainable form of development, which we're recommending should be approved. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. We have one speaker on this. Miranda, if you'd like to come and join us, and just say who you are, who you represent, and you've got 3 minutes, and then remain seated and we'll see the committee with questions.
Good evening. You must feel exactly the same as me. My name is Miranda Rogers. I work for Standscape Planning, a planning consultant, and I represent the applicant for this application. So, the applicant team has worked hard with your offices to ensure that the proposal before you will enhance the appearance and character of the area without detriment to acknowledged interests. In particular, we've sought pre-application advice from County Highways and then followed that advice precisely. We have modified the layout, reducing the number of dwellings proposed from 5 to 4 to address concerns raised by your Conservation Officer, and have substantially enhanced the landscape buffers to create separation between the proposed dwellings and the nearest heritage assets. The result has received support from your officers. Notwithstanding the officer's recommendation for approval, there are a small number of objections to the proposal from the parish council and local residents, which make particular reference to overdevelopment, highway safety, ecology and neighbour amenity, but do not raise concern about the principle of redevelopment. To consider their concerns in turn, overdevelopment. There is no definition of overdevelopment, but the site currently has a very low density of 5 dwellings per hectare. The proposal increases this to 20 dwellings per hectare, which makes better use of the site and is more in keeping with, but still below that of the immediate locality. Moreover, the proposal will remove the wide-fronted 1960s yellow brick house set in Sizewell Garden, which does not accord with the local area, and replaces it with 4 dwellings designed to reflect those nearby. At the front, 2 much narrower 2-storey dwellings set close to the road and finished in a mix of red and buff bricks, and at the rear, 2 dormer bungalows finished in buff brick with clay roofs. Parking is kept out of sight behind the frontage dwellings, and all properties maintain proper street frontage. Highway safety. No objection is raised by County Highways, who confirm not only is this a sustainable location, but that parking is provided in accordance with your council standards to include visitor parking. Indeed, the visitor parking requirement is exceeded. Appropriate visibility displays are provided for pedestrians and vehicles at the site entrance. The additional traffic generated by the proposal will not result in any significant impact on highway network. In fact, it will generate just 1 extra vehicle movement every 30 minutes during peak periods and less than 15 movements in a 24-hour period. It is acknowledged that the site access for construction vehicles may be difficult, but the applicant is content with the proposed condition for a construction management plan to minimise conflict. Ecology, the application was accompanied by an ecological report which did not identify any protected species. The proposal retains many of the boundary trees and considerable additional landscaping will be undertaken, providing opportunities for biodiversity enhancement. And on neighbour amenity, the proposed layout exceeds all the council standards for the protection of neighbour amenity. The rear properties are dormer bungalows with outside windows to avoid conflict with the properties on the southwest. Overall, it complies with your development plan policies, and I ask that you grant planning permission.
Okay, thank you very much. Just remain seated. Just see if anyone's got any questions. Councillor Pruitt.
You need to turn yours off before mine works.
Apologies, I thought it did too.
Thank you. Sorry about that. You say you've reduced the. I mean, I noticed the conservation area or the heritage people's comments about the back of the site. I'm a little bit confused when reading the report as to you say that you've taken one out from 3 to 2. Is that satisfies the visional concerns? Just want to clarify in my mind where we are.
Yes, we put in for 2 at the front, which have not really changed through the course of the application, and we started with 3 at the back. The biggest concern was the proximity of the northernmost house to the northwestern corner boundary. We had a boundary separation of about 2 metres and the council were looking for 5. So the only way we could realistically achieve that was by dropping a unit. So we've now gone down from 3 to 2 to meet those, and now we've got over 5 metre separation.
Thank you. Yeah, because I say initially the comments from the conservation officer were they were concerned about the number of units at the back, but obviously when you read the rest of the report, it wasn't clear to me.
If you read the last paragraph of the conservation officer comment as it's written up in the report, you will see there is a further update in it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any further questions, Councillor Beardsley?
Yes, just a quickie. It's 4 houses and 2 bungalows, is that right?
It's 2 houses and 2 dormer bungalows, a total of 4.
So you're getting 4 houses instead of 1?
Yes.
So yes, it's good. I'm glad that there are some bungalows there and people are desperate for bungalows, especially older people, and it is a lovely village.
And these bungalows have obviously have ground floor bedrooms.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Joyce.
Just a quick one on the Long Buckby Parish Council objection. I think number 6. It said about concerns raised about the close proximity of the church. What exactly? How close is the church? And I'm looking at
the easiest thing is probably to pull a drawing out.
Yeah.
The building to the northwesternmost corner. I don't know if the case officer would be able to just point to it.
Basically,
there.
the church is
It's the United Reformed Church.
From that. Okay.
And then the parcel of land immediately behind is, I would describe it as amenity space, and then beyond that is the graveyard.
Right. Our maps used to be a lot bigger on our paperwork, so we could actually see things. Okay, thank you very much. Anything else to come back on that?
No, Chairman.
Okay, Susan, questions?
Can I just come in and say this is the 3rd application that's been called in by a councillor?
Oh, hold on, we'll come to at the end of the meeting because that's been very potential for years. Councillor
I just would like to propose to go with officer advice.
Okay, yes, I'm happy with that. All those, do I have a seconder? Councillor Cribbin seconding it. All those in favour? That's all. Everybody? Yes, everybody. Right, thank you very much. Councillor Beardsley, in answer to that question, yes, that has been a bone of contention for years, that people are calling things in. It used to happen very much with HIMOs, that the councils would call them in but not attend the meeting. The Constitution changed, as James knows, that we changed the Constitution that if you called the application in, the council calling it in needed to come to the committee.
Yes.
The Constitution changed again, so they no longer need to come. However, if they wanted to, they could submit a statement that Ed would read out, provided he didn't exceed 3 minutes.
Just to come in on that,